Welcome to the Weightlifting Scoop. Got some people who aren't normally on the show. We got Becca Gerdon, Dean Kruse, and then, of course, we have Glenn Pendlay.
Of course.
As cranky as ever.
Yeah, definitely.
Becca said she was going to drop a beat, but then she got scared once the mics were actually on. But
that was not going to happen. That was an off-camera, off-podcast moment.
Morghan King is in the background. In typical Morghan fashion, she is shooting everyone with her imaginary banana gun. Pew pew. It's a joke from what was that? The American Open or something? Nationals last year, her first Nationals. She comes downstairs after she had won Nationals, and she's eating breakfast, and she just started shooting everyone with an imaginary banana gun.
So. It's a real banana, but imaginary gun.
Real banana, fake gun. But, no, we have been talking a lot about women in weightlifting because, for one, we want to recruit some more women and build a women's team here at the tryout, right, Glenn?
Right. We definitely are looking. And we have quite a few women that have signed up with the stated intention of trying out for the team. So
that's
I think
exciting.
That hopefully you'll see some new girls after the tryout.
Yeah, and Dean here owns a CrossFit gym. It's a CrossFit gym, right, Dean?
It is.
And so with that being said, he's coached a lot of women who were CrossFitters, kind of switching over to weightlifting, including Morghan, who is obviously a huge weightlifting talent.
I wouldn't say a lot of lifters, or CrossFitters, but Morghan and maybe one or two others.
Yeah, but you have experience. You kind of worked with Morghan in the beginning, and you have a good idea of how to work with women in general. And Becca here to give the female perspective on some of those things. So I think it's going to be an exciting show. Hopefully we can answer a lot of those questions that you guys have been sending me, because we have had a fair amount of women asking me about these things. So I guess we'll let Glenn get started. So you've coached, of all different ages, you've coached some women ranging from how old to how old?
Well, ranging from, Sammy Nichols was one of the youngest. I started her out when she was 7 or 8, and she competed until she made the school-age world team when she was maybe 15 or 16. She eventually gave weightlifting up. I have a girl named Neiman right now who is 15 and on track to make some major international teams. I also had several college girls that were, I think, quite talented. A couple of them that trained at Northern Michigan eventually. And so, I've coached some decent women over the years, enough to kind of get an idea of some of the differences between the girls and the guys, so to speak.
What are some of the main differences that you've seen? Physically, is there a lot different training methods that you would use with females versus male?
I don't think there's anything revolutionary, but I do think that women tend to be able to stand higher volume than men.
Which is kind of interesting because men have higher testosterone. So you would expect that because men have such higher testosterone that they would recover faster. Do you have any ideas of why women recover faster?
I don't have any, set in stone ideas, but I have heard, and discussing this with other people that, from a physiological standpoint, I've heard many theories. One is that, childbirth for women basically gives them some kind of reserve, energy that they are then able to utilize during that stressful time. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's definitely a theory that many people that should know have expounded upon. And women generally are not as efficient as guys when it comes to higher intensity lifts. And I don't know exactly what ramifications that has as far as the, more endurance that women tend to have with heavy training. But it stands to reason that if you're more limited in the absolute intensity that you can bring to bear on heavy lifts, that you should be able to do more heavy lifts.
Now, structurally, now any of you guys, if you can answer this question, because I don't know. Now, structurally, is there much difference in like the skeleton, the ligaments, and all that kind of structures of females versus males?
Well, ligaments for women tend to, change over time on a monthly cycle. And there's been, especially the Chinese have done a lot of research on this, but, there's certain times of the month when women tend to have a lot stretchier ligaments than other times. And I think that structurally, obviously, there's differences in the hip structure and things like that, and women obviously are more flexible also. And, all those things tend to add up to a better weightlifters. All the skeletal differences, I think, are an advantage to women. But the biggest thing is flexibility, and also, women tend to have a lower center of gravity, so to speak. They have more mass in their lower body, less mass in their upper body, and that, I think, is an advantage also.
Okay, so Sean Rigsby seems to have something that he wants to say.
So I've done some reading about this where women are supposed to neurologically be less efficient. They can't activate as many muscle fibers when they do movement, less contractile potential. So the theory is because they aren't able to do as much muscular contraction while they're doing the lift, obviously they'll have a lower 1RM. And they'll use up less energy, less glycogen, and that'll allow them to have better strength endurance.
Yeah, that's actually something that I've never heard before, which is extremely interesting because I did always hear, from Bob Morris, who was the head women's coach out at the OTC, he always had them doing a lot higher intensity than what he would have the men's program doing. And when I would ask him about it, he would say that women could recover faster, and I didn't know why, and that's a very good reason. Now, Dean, get on here, man. You're kind of sitting over there quiet.
Well, I don't have much experience coaching weightlifters other than Morgan, and most of the experience I've had with individuals has been 20-plus-year-olds, and like Glenn was saying, I think that guys in that age range end up having mobility issues, whether that's just a guy thing, physically. I think that most guys end up focusing on upper body strength, in their teens and in their early 20s, and by the time they get to do weightlifting, their overhead position is very tight, and their hips are pretty tight. But women, don't focus on the upper body strength as much.
Now, when you guys, now, do you think that upper body strength is a weakness for you, Becca?
Totally.
Really? Okay. Now, Glenn and Dean, do you guys think that that when you're coaching a woman that you should focus more on upper body strength than you would with their?
Well, I think if it's a weak point with them, you should. But I think that you're never going to rectify that 100%. And for most lifters, that ends up being okay because women, because nobody really needs an absolute maximal upper body strength to do weightlifting. I think that women, by having a lack of upper body strength, tend to have an advantage in learning how to do the lifts correctly. And obviously, you're going to lift more weight doing things correctly than you are muscling it up with a surplus of upper body strength. So I think, the lack of upper body strength tends to end up being an advantage for most women.
Oh, yeah, I 100% agree with that at first, but then as they're developed a lifter with good technique, do you think there would be an advantage to doing more pull-ups, presses, push presses, those types of things, after they already have good technique established for a couple years?
Probably so, Probably so.
You see that a lot of girls end up cleaning a lot more than they can jerk. And I think that in the development, the clean comes a lot faster, and then over time, the jerk ends up having to catch up. So
now, when you first started working with Morgan, what kind of things did you guys start doing? I mean, you guys lived in Washington. You kind of occasionally went up to go see John Thrush, who was obviously one of the more known women's weightlifting coaches because he coached Melanie Roach, which Morgan started out as a 53, and it was almost kind of
Yeah. Well, Morgan had the opportunity to go down and lift at one of John Thrush's meets, and I think was Melanie there, Morgan?
Yeah.
Melanie was there, and so I think she met Melanie, and there's pictures of Melanie all over the walls. And so I don't know if that was like an inspiration or if that was motivation for her, but yeah, that was cool for her to see, a woman that isn't necessarily very muscular putting up pretty big weights. I think there's a picture of her clean and jerk in 114 or 113 on the wall. In the split and the jerk. So, yeah. And in terms of what we did when we were starting out, we just went through Pendlay steps 1, 2, 3 for, the clean and the snatch. And the jerk is something she lagged behind, but she was so strong that, for the weight she was cleaning, her jerk was sufficient. And then, when she came here, she obviously had to work on a lot of technique, which we just kind of neglected when we were working the lifts.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously today, Morgan cleans 100 kilos, so she can basically clean the American record, and the jerk is creeping up there. So,
yeah, she just hit 96 from the neck, so that's pretty good.
Yeah. 95 clean and jerk. So, we're obviously really happy with her, the progress that she's made in that. And I think, now, Becca, when you first started weightlifting, did you view it as a guy's sport?
No, but I didn't know very many girls that were in the sport. All my training partners were guys, and until Morgan got here, I was the only girl here.
Yeah. I think a lot of girls kind of view weightlifting as a guy's sport up until recently, obviously with CrossFit kind of changing the perception of that. I mean, would you guys agree that CrossFit had a lot to do with that perception change?
I would agree.
It's helped, yeah.
And I think CrossFit in general has just, I mean, there's women, a lot of women in weightlifting back in the day couldn't do pull-ups. I mean, obviously in the Metcons and CrossFit, these girls are doing tons of pull-ups. They're doing muscle-ups, things that women really couldn't do unless they were, well, even, it wasn't a big gymnastics thing for women to do muscle-ups. So I think that's really helped just in general develop our weightlifting team. A lot of the girls that are younger now, like Lauren Fisher and Maddie Rogers, they came from CrossFit. So I think just having more women in weightlifting has made those girls decide that they want to do this. So
yeah, and you can't. I mean, you can blame a lot of that on CrossFit, but keep in mind that women's weightlifting is a very, very new sport. The guys' weightlifting has been around forever, but the women just started weightlifting at the Olympic level in 2000. So that's very, very recently, and because of that, it's still on the rise, and the performances are still going up consistently and quite a bit. And so it's a new sport, and it's new to women. And so I think that it's understandable that things are changing rapidly, and I think they'll change more.
So basically, physically, not a whole lot of difference, but they can go heavier slightly more often because neurologically they're less efficient. Now, emotionally, I do think it is a different animal. You have to treat women and men differently in training. And I coached at a CrossFit where I had a lot of men's clients and women's clients, and I mean, I can definitely say it's different. Or is there some things that you guys have recognized, like some strategies to coach women differently?
Well, I think that women tend to let things bother them in training more. I mean, you could easily get in trouble talking about this, but if you had a female and a guy, if a guy misses, 7 times, they're more likely to be very stubborn and want to keep trying 12 times or 20 times until they make. A female is probably more likely to call it quits. And that can be good or bad, but I think that most people probably focus on they're less determined or something like that. But there's a lot of good points to that too. You're obviously more likely to get hurt and things like that if you're very stubborn. And women tend to be spared that a little bit just because of their mental makeup.
Dean, what are some things that you've noticed? I mean, obviously you don't want to get in trouble with Morgan here.
No.
But I mean, in all seriousness, some things that Morgan and other of your female clients kind of how they handle things emotionally different than you would in training?
Well, similar to what Glenn said, I think guys want to red line more often. They want to max out more often, and I think girls or women, I think they benefit from having a percentage written down for them to hit, and they would hit that without, attempting to push past that. Whereas guys, I think, want to be competitive, especially if they see a guy that they're training with hitting higher numbers. I think they'd be more inclined to attempt to beat their friend next to them.
Becca, now, does it really upset? Now, do you feel like sometimes that you feel different in training than like we do when certain workouts come up?
I think a lot of the differences are more just person to person rather than from men to women. And I agree with what you're saying on how women will, I feel like, know their body better and know when they should call it quits, whereas some guys tend to be hard-headed and will keep pushing when really they should just call it a day and rest up for tomorrow. So I don't know.
Well, I just want to agree with something Rebecca said, in that there's more differences from person to person with both women and men than there are just generalized differences between women and men. I mean, what we're talking about are things that your average female versus your average male, seems to be a small difference in the average attitudes. But there's much more differences between, one male and another male, or one woman and another woman, than there are the averages between the sexes. And you can easily overlook that. I mean, some guys are just stubborn as can be, and some aren't. And probably the same could be said with women.
And one other thing that I've noticed, at least for new lifters, they tend to be more comfortable with a female coach. So I have people at the gym I work at that prefer working with me rather than the other male coaches, just having another girl there to coach them. So
yeah, and that makes sense. Now when I was at CrossFit gyms, I worked with men and women and it was, I will say, as a general rule, you're totally right. Everyone is different, but generally speaking, the women were definitely more emotional. They would get really upset if they had a bad workout, and they would really let it affect them. It was really hard. It was hard for me because they would get so upset. It was sometimes hard to really approach them and talk them down. I didn't really have as much of that with men, but there was definitely some of it. What kind of things do you guys think that you can do to combat that? I don't really know. I never really got good at emotionally connecting in those times of need, I guess.
Yeah, and like Glenn said, individually everybody's different. I think it's an individual sport, and the coach is there to help you with a lot of things, but emotional stability is something that I think a lot of people in their 20s, have already developed. And you can see it, like some people, like Glenn said, if you're if you're missing lifts and you get hot-headed and you continue to miss lifts, you have a chance of getting hurt. You're really not doing yourself any favors by keeping going. But a lot of people who I think are a little more level-headed and a little more emotionally stable, if you will just call it a day and come back the next day and do just fine. I know for Morghan lifts. When I was coaching her, I wasn't telling her, stop now, keep going. Now she had the ability to know when to stop and when to keep going. I think that's.
I think probably a lot of women do benefit from that. Having people have more of a set procedure for when to stop and when to go. Just the things that I have seen from girls, they really seem to really appreciate having a set yes or no. If you're going for a 90% lift, okay, go for it. Now stop. We're moving on. I don't think that the women that I've coached really respond well to a coach not knowing what to do or saying, do you want to stop or do you want to go on? that doesn't seem to go over as well with women as it does with guys, because most guys are just going to say, okay, let's try again, let's try again, let's try again. And you don't get that reliably with women, and it's probably not a good thing. It's not that you want to reliably get that sort of input, but I think girls in general probably really appreciate having definite boundaries in training, probably more than guys.
I mean, one thing I found is that I had to, I definitely tried to be a lot more positive and give more input. Now with guys, for instance, it didn't seem like when I was coaching men's athletes, they didn't want a lot of coaching cues between sets. They kind of wanted to get through the workout. I would take a few videos and deliberate with them after the training session. Women seem to want more immediate feedback, so that they can go to the next set with that feedback you just gave them. And men seem to, again, this is generally with the people that I've worked out with, they generally seem to want to just do the workout and then talk to me afterwards.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that totally. I think it's because, like, you're a guy, I'm a guy, and when we're coaching guys, there's always a little bit of, I guess, competition or something between guys just because we're both men. And there's a kind of, competitiveness there, where guys don't really appreciate the touchy-feely or they're trying to ramp them up a little bit or something like that. They just basically want you to, more shut up and tell them, to do another snatch or something like that. Whereas it seems like, women tend to appreciate more feedback. I think it just seems to a lot of women, it just seems to be calming to them. So they absolutely know without any doubt exactly what you thought of that lift or exactly what you thought of that set and how you think they're doing in the workout and things like that. And I think a lot of that is sociological. I mean, I don't think that has really any physiological basis, but I think it's just probably a difference in the way women and men are socialized. They just expect different things, are comfortable with different things from a coach, especially a male coach.
Now, are we talking crazy, Becca, or?
Well, I just want to say that I think women can be extremely competitive.
Oh,
also.
yeah.
Me and Morgan push each other a lot in the gym, and then even when we're doing our on lifts on certain days, we're trying to compete with everyone in the gym, guys and girls, for who can hit the highest percentage of their lift for whatever we're doing. And I think that's a huge fuel for women as well as guys.
Oh yeah. I know Morgan the other day, she did the complex and had the lead for a while. Caleb he was playing possum for a little bit. Oh, I feel bad. He was just buying time so he could do it last. But Morgan put up a huge thing, and Morgan is hugely competitive, as is Becca. So I know both of you guys are extremely competitive, and I'll almost say, like, women sometimes get brutal. Like, they'll act like they aren't competitive at first, and then all of a sudden they'll be like a girl that started at the same time as them. They're saying, like, ugly things to me about that girl. Like
Not
that stupid girl. She's doing 1 more kilo than me in the snatch when we started out at the same time. She just waited to see what I did so I could do 1 more. She could do 1 more kilo than me. I mean, I've actually had a fair amount of that, so I would definitely not say that women aren't competitive with each other, but if it's a bad day, they get pissed, but they also stop.
Well, not to throw Morgan under the bus or anything, but
please do.
Well, okay. Well, when she's at home looking at videos online of other lifters, she'll watch somebody, international lifter, somebody who's also a national lifter here in the U.S. And I hear her all the time say, "God, I'm gonna crush that girl. I'm just gonna absolutely crush that girl." And she's like, "I want to snatch more than that girl clean and jerks."
Yeah.
I'm sure, I'm sure a lot of other girls talk like that, but it's kind of weird to have your
girlfriend. Oh, sure. Everybody.
Aggressively.
The name of the game is, like, to be the best, right? I mean, we're all here for a reason. We train hard for a reason. Everybody's alpha, like if you don't believe you're the best or you don't believe that you can be the best, you're not going to be. So everyone, you know, I would imagine everybody in our gym thinks that they're the best. And that's just the way it is, you know, like, I think you could probably ask every person, like, oh, you know, what numbers are you going to hit? And they'll tell you numbers that they're going to be the best, you know, and that's an important piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. I think that's one cool thing about social media is that you can go online and see women or other lifters in similar weight classes and what they're doing, and then, you know, try and beat that number. I know I do that all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's definitely one thing that when you guys, Glenn, started posting those videos of Cal Strength, I think that's one of the things that kind of sparked people to try to compete against those guys. I mean, I know I would sit there and I would be like, what did Kevin snatch today? What did John clean and jerk today? You know, I'd want to beat those numbers, and that's kind of what I base my training around. So social media is huge.
Yeah, and I think that social media has had a lot to do with the growth of weightlifting, even just with not talking about men or women, but the internet and social media has really helped the sport in general.
Now, Morgan, now that you're over here, which, I mean, we're very glad to have you on the podcast. I'm glad that you decided to come over. When you first started weightlifting, did you feel like it was kind of a guy's sport? Were you kind of tentative to start it? I mean, I know you have a soccer background, maybe some other sports. Was it kind of scary, or?
I honestly think that was some of the appeal. Like, not a lot of women were doing it, you know, and I've always felt like, you know, the little girl, or, you know, and when I went and competed in CrossFit, like, I was by far the smallest girl. So I think when I decided, hey, I'm going to get stronger for CrossFit, I realized that weightlifting, you could be small and strong, and it was a very technical sport. And kind of going back to, you know, like, oh, guys will go until they get it. Well, I think as females, we are more technically minded. Like, we're not going to go on unless we're doing it properly. We're not going to just muscle the snatch up just because we can. And that's why I think we get more frustrated, is because we know something's breaking down where it's not necessarily our strength, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I agree with that. Women tend to be more of a technically minded nature, and better able to diagnose like their own form problems or things like that, because they're realistic about it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times guys let the ego and the high testosterone kind of get in their way, and they want to make a lift no matter what, whether it's good, whether it's bad, whatever, just make the lift. And I think women don't really have that. And it makes it easier for them to get things right and easier to lift the weights in the long run.
Yeah. I think it's definitely more of kind of like a finesse type of sport for us, where, you know, it's not like this brute strength, like, wow, we're going to get it up there. But it's like, let's do it right. You know, it's kind of goes back to that whole women follow directions, men don't kind of thing, I think.
Yeah.
But
we want to be able to control the strength.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess I do have a different perspective on that. I mean, but I think that definitely varies from person to person, too. But, yeah, I can definitely see that from men and women.
Yeah.
I probably am somewhat extreme on the other side where, you know, I think at heavyweights your technique is going to break down, and I definitely think your technique has to change when you get, as the weight becomes a certain amount heavier than your body weight, your technique almost has to change for you to make it. So I think it's important that if you are missing a weight, to sometimes continuously take it, because you have to learn how to make those small technical changes at the very, very heavy weights. So that's sometimes how I view it. And I know that, so I'm probably on the extreme other side where, you know, I think, you know, screw it, you have to make a weight sometimes in order to get better. And then, you know, on the other side of that, it's you shouldn't do a weight unless it's perfect technique, on the other extreme. So that is interesting.
I mean, there's definitely like a mental like breakthrough or push through that you have to get. You know, I know there's, once I get past 70, it's 72 or 71, 72, and 73 are just these mental blocks. And, you know, I'm going to have to some days just get after it. And it doesn't matter, you know, if it's good or if it's not. As long as I get it up, I'm happy, you know. And then you start to kind of continue to progress, I think, after that, you know. I think everybody has that certain weight that you have to
stop thinking and
Yeah.
just get after it.
Yeah, exactly.
So we did it. We also had the episode on nutrition with Nick Shaw, the owner of Renaissance Periodization, last week, and we had a lot of questions about. We generalize it for men, honestly. So we had a lot of questions about women. There's obviously differences in body fat percentages between men and women, and we basically only talked about men. So based on the questions we got and what Nick's answers were, he said when women get below 15% body fat, they generally have maxed out their weight class if they're 2 kilos over. So, for instance, if Morgan here is weighing 50 kilos at 15% body fat, then that would be very good. She's basically kind of optimized her weight class. Obviously, at 48, she can't drop a weight class anyways. But if someone like Becca was sitting at 15% body fat at 77 kilos, then she will have done about approximately, on average, as good as she can do in that weight class. Whereas for men, he had given single digits, so 9 to 10%, sitting 2 kilos over. Glenn, what do you think?
Oh, I think you're right. I mean, women can't drop as low body fat as men can, and that's purely physiological. We are starting to see more women very low body fat because of CrossFit, probably. But there's certainly a limit that you really can't go under without some really major physical effects and bad physical effects.
So, potentially an embarrassing question, but something that people did ask questions on. Now, when you're menstruating, women tend to weigh more. So if you know that you're going to be at a competition when that's going on, you need to kind of adjust your cut accordingly. Now, Becca, would you like to speak on that or not really? Or
I don't know. My weight doesn't seem to fluctuate that much, like once a month like that. So I might be weird, but I don't know. That's just me.
No, I think I'm probably about the same, and I think also just being an athlete, like it doesn't, like because you are at a lower body fat, I don't know if it affects you as much. That might differ from women to women.
Okay.
Woman to woman.
Yeah, that too. And but no, I mean, if I get pretty strict, like a month out, I get pretty strict of like what I'm eating. And so I think that kind of helps me as well. Mm-hmm. I think when you start to eat kind of different things, or just eating whatever you want, it does affect your body. But
I think when it approaches that time of month, from feedback I've gotten from a lot of different female clients and stuff, they can be up to 1.5 kilos heavier. And if you're in one of the smaller weight classes, that is a tough thing to do, and you definitely have to adjust it. And if you're one of those people, you need to weigh yourself daily, because you kind of need to know that, and you kind of need to know when that's coming up so you can adjust your weight cut accordingly. Yeah. Water drop, just what you're eating, how that kind of affects it. And it's something that you kind of have to track over time, because it's not something you can track every day. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that athletes in general, and probably weightlifters definitely, probably have an easier time with that just because they're so regimented. Yeah. And a lot of the fluctuation of, weight and things like that are going to be due to what you eat. And if you don't let, what you eat vary from day to day, you're obviously not going to have as much fluctuation in water, gain or something like that. Yeah. I think probably some people probably, or some women probably, overeat a little bit at certain times of the month. And so they end up going up with their water weight, as well as fat. And that affects them probably more. And probably, I'm assuming, not being a female myself, but I'm assuming that if you are emotional around that time period, if you see that you're weighing 3 extra pounds, that's probably going to add to the emotion and things like that. And so, keeping your diet strict is probably the best thing to minimize all those symptoms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I guess when we talked about macronutrient breakdown, so women are going to be, they're going to have a higher percentage body fat naturally, generally between 5 and 10% higher than their male counterparts. And so with that being said, they're going to have to eat a little less calories, even at the same body weight, because they're just going to have less muscle mass at that body weight. So you're going to have to change those things a little bit. I don't have 100% specific answers for that, but hopefully we answered a lot of you guys' questions. Do you guys have anything else today?
Well, I had a quick question for Glenn about programming for women. You said that women are able to handle a higher volume
I think
than men generally throughout a training cycle. So how do you differ the training? I mean, I know that here we do pretty much the same thing for guys and girls, and that doesn't change based on gender, but more based on individuals.
It's probably just especially more volume at lower percentages. In the 80 to 85 or 80 to 90% range, I think women can probably, in general, handle a little extra volume than men. So I guess we just do more, a simple answer. Whether squats or pulls or whatever, just add a little extra to the volume. And I don't know of any really scientific method to choose what to add, but when you're adding up the reps for the month, if a guy's doing 1,000 reps a month and, you want a woman to do 1,200 reps or something, that's probably appropriate. Mm-hmm. Because you have to remember that the women aren't not going to have as high of absolute intensity. So they've got to get the work some other way.
By volume, okay.
Well, yeah, so training's going really good. We're going to, I guess the sheriff still has the title belt. I think, I don't know if we're having a contest this week, but hopefully today's going to be pretty heavy. I know we're going to be doing some heavier cleans. Pretty excited about that. So I guess we got to
clean 185 for a triple today, or 180 for a triple today. Sorry.
Yeah, Glenn keeps jumping the gun. He keeps telling me that I'm going to do 185 for a triple. I said, look, dude,
it's just because I want you to do 185
I got to do
so bad.
180 for a triple first. All right, but no, I'm definitely going to go for that today. So hopefully that goes well. Maybe I'll have a video. I'm going to be training with Sean Rigsby today.
Doing 180 for a triple?
And we are going to get so crunk.
All right.
So, anyways, you guys got anything before we go head off to training? Some good stuff. You got some plugs, whatever.
Go buy a bar, Pendlay bar.
You can follow me on Instagram at Gerdon.
Gerdon. But you've also been writing on this site that you and Greg Knuckles and Ryan Grady have been writing on. So tell us a little bit about that. This is your opportunity.
Yep. So Ryan is writing about the CrossFit side of things. Greg Knuckles is writing about powerlifting, and I'm doing more weightlifting style articles, and that's on pushingitfurther.com.
And Dean, you own a gym in Seattle. Is that correct?
I do. I own a gym in Seattle.
So if you are in Seattle, what gyms did you drop in at?
The Lab Strength and Conditioning.
All right, cool. So anyways, guys, thanks for listening, and thank you for Becca and Dean being on the podcast, and we will see you guys either later on in the week or next week.